I don't remember the exact moment when my body hit the floor. All I recall is the thundering pain in my ribs, the crushing silence that followed, and the faint echo of a door slamming shut behind him. When I woke up 2 days later, I was in a hospital bed, my face so swollen I could barely open my eyes. 6 ribs broken, bruises blooming like rotten fruit across my chest. The nurse gently whispered, "You're safe now. Honey, you've been asleep for a while." But her eyes said something else, something like sorrow, or maybe disbelief. That's when they told me he was gone. Gerald, my husband, the man I married, believing he'd be my forever. He'd disappeared with my neighbor Marcia. Yes, Marcia, the same woman who waved to me every morning over the fence, who brought me cookies when I lost my second baby, who whispered, "You deserve better," when I cried quietly in the yard. She left with him, together, and me, I was left behind with broken bones, a broken heart, and a story I never thought I'd survive. But I did. Hello, my darlings. My name is Dorothy Wilson, but these days, most folks online just call me Grandma Dot. I'm 73 years old now, and I've lived in Louisville, Kentucky for the past 40 years. But I was born in the red earth of Pikeville coal country, and this story, the one I'm about to tell you, is the reason I left everything behind and never looked back. It's a story I've kept buried for decades like a splinter deep under the skin. It stings when you touch it, but it hurts worse when you try to pull it out. Today, I'm ready to tell it. Before we go further, my dears, let me ask something soft, like a whisper through the screen. If this story has already stirred something in you, a memory, a feeling, a moment you've lived yourself, I would love to hear about it. Where are you listening from? Are you watching with a warm drink by your side? Are you alone? Or sharing this story with someone you love? Leave a little note in the comments. You don't need to say much, just enough for this old lady to know you're out there, listening. We may be strangers by name, but not by heart. And if you feel like it, go ahead and click that subscribe button. It helps me keep telling stories here at Tenacity Tales channel, where old hearts still have new things to say. Thank you, my loves. Now, let's go back in time. I was born in 1951, in a little wooden house nestled between the hills of Pikeville, Kentucky, a place where coal dust settled on everything like a second skin, and where life was hard, but love was honest. My daddy, Mr. Anthony, worked down in the mines. He came home every day covered in black soot in his hair, under his nails, even in the creases of his smile. To me, it looked like sparkly powder from another world. But now I know that dust was the slow poison that stole his breath, day by day. My mama, Elizabeth, washed clothes for the neighbors and baked bread that people swore was touched by angels. The smell of her bread in the oven, and the sound of her humming while sweeping, was the background music of my childhood. We didn't have much, just a small house with 2 bedrooms, a rickety porch, and a backyard filled with apple, peach, and cherry trees. But I never once thought we were poor. I thought we had everything. There was a vegetable garden my mama tended to like it was the queen's own. Our stove was wood-burning and always warm. And our little battery-powered radio played Elvis Presley while my sisters and I danced barefoot on the kitchen floor. The sky in Pikeville, it was the kind of blue that made you forget pain existed, wide and open and wild. Like the future. My mama used to tell me, "Dorothy, when you find a man, look at how he looks at you. That'll tell you everything." And I'd watch the way my father looked at her, after spending all day underground, breaking his back in darkness. He'd walk in, wrap his arms around her from behind, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "What's for supper? My queen." That's the kind of love I grew up believing in. Simple, gentle, full of everyday reverence. So, of course, I expected the same when I grew up. It was a Thursday morning in late August when he first walked into my classroom. Tall, clean-shaven, shirt tucked in just right, he looked out of place among the muddy boots and tired faces of Pikeville. "Excuse me," he said with a voice smooth like river stones. "Are you the teacher?" I was only 20 at the time. Fresh out of teacher training. Still getting used to the idea that anyone would call me Miss Wilson. "Yes," I replied, probably blushing all over. "My name's Dorothy. Dorothy Wilson." He extended a hand large. Warm. "Sure. Gerald Thompson. I'm enrolling my nephew. He's 7. From that moment, something shifted. A current. A pull. He didn't look at me the way others did. He didn't look through me. Or around me. He looked right at me. Like I was something rare. And then he came again. And again. Always right after school. Always with a smile. Always with a compliment. "Your eyes shine when you read aloud. That dress was made for you?" I've always admired women with brains. So beautiful. I had never been courted before. Raised with good morals and protective parents. I'd never even held hands with a boy. But Gerald made me feel seen. Like I mattered. When he asked me out for ice cream one Friday afternoon, my heart beat so loud I could barely say yes. That night, I told Mama. She frowned slightly, drying her hands with the dish towel. "Men who are too handsome," she warned, "usually know they're handsome, and that kind can break a heart with a smile. But he's so respectful." "Mama, he hasn't even touched my hand." "Not yet," she said, eyes knowing. "Not yet." It started slowly, as all dangerous things often do. Gerald would come by on Sundays, dressed neatly in his khaki slacks and light-colored shirt. Carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers, he said, reminded him of me. He joined us for lunch, charmed my father with talk of baseball and the weather, helped my mother wash dishes afterward, which no man in our town ever did. Mama said little, but watched everything. Daddy pulled me aside one day. "This young man seems fine. Dorothy, but go slow. You hear me. Even the prettiest apple can hide a worm inside." I nodded, but in truth, I was already falling. He wrote me little notes folded in half, tucked into my school books. "The way you explain things makes the world feel softer. If I ever have a daughter, I hope she turns out like you." My heart soaked in every word like dry earth in a summer rain. He never crossed a line, never touched me inappropriately. When he kissed me, it was tender, chaste, careful. "I want to do everything right with you, Dorothy." He'd say, "You're not just any woman. You're the woman." I had no experience in love, only fairy tales, and the way Daddy looked at Mama. And Gerald? Gerald looked at me that way. By month 6, he was a fixture at our house. By month 9, I couldn't picture a future without him. So when he proposed on a Sunday afternoon, in front of my whole family with a small silver ring and teary eyes, there was no hesitation. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Looking back now, I wonder, was it love I saw in his eyes that day, or was it something else, wearing love like a mask? We got married on a cold January morning in 1972. The First Baptist Church was filled with neighbors in borrowed suits, homemade flower arrangements, and the scent of orange cake drifting in from the back room. My dress was sewn by my mother and aunts, stitched with so much care you'd think it came from a bridal boutique. Not a worn wooden table in our kitchen. As Daddy walked me down the aisle, I saw Gerald waiting at the altar, hair neatly combed, a rented suit that fit just right, his eyes gleaming, like he had just found heaven. I remember thinking, this is it. I've done it. I found my forever. After the ceremony, after the laughter and photos and slices of cake passed around on paper plates, we left for Gatlinburg, Tennessee, a week in the mountains. Just the two of us. It was his gift to me. A new beginning. The first night, he was gentle, sweet, patient. He touched me carefully, asked if I was all right, brushed the hair from my face and whispered, "You're mine now. Dorothy, I'll take care of you forever." I wanted to believe that, and for 2 days, I did. But on the third night, something changed. He became different, not violent, not cruel, not yet, but sharper, hungrier. He started making demands I didn't understand, asking me to do things that made my cheeks burn with shame. He hesitated. He didn't like that. My wife, he said, voice low, should please me the way I want. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I just did what he asked, and cried in the dark, where he couldn't see. Because wasn't that what wives were supposed to do? Give, serve, obey. By the time we returned to Pikeville, I felt like a different woman. Not in the way you expect after a honeymoon, but in the way someone feels when the wind changes and they don't know if a storm is coming or if it's already here. Married life started in a quiet little house Gerald had rented near the school where I taught. It was small, but it had charm: a tiny porch, a patch of grass out front, and a back window that caught the morning light just right. I dreamed of planting tomatoes and herbs, like Mama used to, of filling that house with warmth and books and baby laughter. At first, we were adjusting, two people learning how to share space, share silence, share expectations. I tried to cook his favorite meals, fold his shirts the way he liked. He kept his job at the furniture store, and I continued teaching. But it didn't take long before the cracks started to show. Gerald began to criticize little things: too much salt in the beans, a blouse I wore that he said was too bright for a married woman, or the way I spoke to my students. Why do you need lipstick to teach kids? Who was that man talking to you outside school? That man was the 70-year-old janitor. Then I found out I was pregnant. I was overjoyed. All my life, I had dreamed of being a mother, of reading bedtime stories, of tiny socks on the clothesline. When I told Gerald, he seemed pleased. He hugged me, kissed my forehead. For real this time, he said, I'm going to be a father. And for a few short weeks, he returned to being the man I fell in love with. Attentive, gentle, almost soft, until I lost the baby. A sudden pain in my lower belly, blood soaking through my dress on the bathroom floor. And then, the hollow silence of a hospital room with no heartbeat. When I came home, everything changed. Gerald's face hardened. His touch grew cold. You should have taken better care, he said flatly. You lost my son by being careless. That was the first night I locked myself in the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and cried until my stomach ached so he wouldn't hear me. But he wasn't listening anyway. The second pregnancy came with more fear than joy. I followed every instruction from the doctor, rested more, ate better, stopped staying late at school. I barely breathed without thinking of the life inside me. Gerald seemed excited again, or maybe just hopeful. He touched my belly more often, spoke to it like it could already hear. This time, he said, it's going to work. For a moment, I let myself believe it too. But in the 5th month, it happened again. The bleeding started one quiet afternoon while I was folding laundry. The pain was sharper this time. The loss, deeper. Back at the hospital, the doctor's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. We're sorry, Mrs. Thompson. There was nothing more we could do. When I came home, There were no flowers, no soft words, just Gerald, sitting on the edge of the bed, arms crossed. "You can't even carry a child," he said, his voice like gravel in a dry throat. "My mother had 8. You lose 2. Back to back. It's not my fault," I said, quietly. "The doctor said it happens sometimes. You're broken." He snapped. "Something's wrong with you." That night, for the first time, I raised my voice. And it cost me. "You think you help with your mood, your silence, you treat me like a maid." "Not a wife," I shouted. And then his hand. It came so fast I didn't even see it. Only felt the sharp slap across my cheek. The sting. The shock. My body falling back into the wall behind me. For a few seconds, the world went silent. Then his voice came. Low and full of warning. "Don't ever talk to me like that again. I'm your husband. You owe me respect." He walked away like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just struck the woman he once kissed so gently on their wedding night. That night, I sat on the cold bathroom floor, ice pressed to my swollen cheek, thinking only one thought over and over again: I need to leave. But I didn't. Because when you've grown up being taught that marriage is forever, that a wife must endure, shame can feel heavier than pain, and silence becomes a prison you build yourself. The 3rd year of our marriage didn't feel like marriage at all. It felt like slow drowning each day, pulling me deeper. While on the surface I smiled, pretending I could still breathe. Gerald lost his job at the furniture store. Something about money missing from the till. He swore he was innocent. But I had already learned how to read the truth behind his eyes. They flickered when he lied. He stayed home all day after that, shirtless, beer in hand by noon. What began as one drink turned into bottles. What began as insults turned into punches. And me, I became an expert at excuses. I tripped over the rug. I fell getting out of the bathtub. I walked into a cabinet. My coworkers didn't believe me. But they nodded anyway. People didn't want the truth. It made them uncomfortable. Even my parents, who lived just a few streets away, began to notice. One Sunday, Mama found me crying quietly in the kitchen. "Dorothy," she whispered, "if something's wrong, you can come home. We'll take you in." "I'm fine, Mama," I lied. "It's just a hard season. It'll pass." But it didn't. It only got worse. That was when she appeared. Marcia, the neighbor with the perfect blonde hair, the tight clothes, and a smile too sweet to be trusted. She had just gone through a divorce and lived alone next door. At first, she seemed like a blessing. Brought me cookies, helped me in the garden, offered tissues when I cried in the backyard. "He hits you, doesn't he?" she asked one day. "That's not love." Whissing. "You know that." Right, I didn't answer. Maybe because deep down, I did know. She became my only friend, my only safe place, and Gerald hated it. "She's trash," he said. "She'll pull you down with her. She's the only one who listens." I replied, "What do you care?" What I didn't know then was that while I was teaching children to spell, Gerald was spelling out lies in Marcia's bed. If you're still listening, maybe something in this story has tugged at your heart. Just a little. Am I right? You don't have to write much, but if you feel like it, leave a small comment below. Just a line, just enough to let this old soul know you're here. A simple, "I'm here." Grandma. That's more than enough. Here at Tenacity Tales, I keep these stories alive not for myself, but for you. And if this space feels like something you'd like to return to, you're welcome to hit that subscribe button. Quietly, gently, just so we don't lose each other. The next part of this story, it's the hardest one. But if you're still here, I know we'll walk through it together. It happened on a Thursday. The school day had ended early due to a power outage. My head ached. The children's noise still rang in my ears. I just wanted to go home. To rest. But when I opened the door, the world shifted. Shoes in the hallway. Laughter. A woman's perfume sweet. Musky. Then, a sound from the bedroom, Gerald's voice. Low. Playful. I walked like a ghost toward the noise. And there they were. Gerald. Half-dressed. Marcia. Her shirt halfway buttoned. Lipstick smudged. My body froze, but my voice came out anyway. Trembling Marcia. She turned, startled. But Gerald, he didn't flinch. He stared at me with something between rage and shame. You weren't supposed to be here, he said flatly. And then he charged. I didn't have time to run. He grabbed me. Slammed me against the wall. Fists flying. Rage pouring out of him like wildfire. I could barely hear Marcia screaming. She tried to pull him back once, then stumbled. Terrified. And then she ran. I saw the front door slam behind her before the second punch knocked me down. Blood filled my mouth. The world went black and red and spinning. Then silence. I don't remember who found me. I only remember waking up later, not in that house, but in Ruth's home. Safe, but not whole. And Marcia gone. Just like that. Like she vanished into smoke. I don't remember the ride to my sister's house. I only remember waking up in her spare bedroom, a patch of sunlight on my cheek. The scent of lemon soap on her pillow. And the steady hum of someone making tea in the kitchen. My body hurt everywhere. Ribs. Face. Wrists. But worse than the pain was the stillness. No more shouting. No more Gerald. Just silence. And I didn't know if that made me feel safe. Or emptier than ever. My sister, Ruth, moved like a storm disguised as a breeze. She didn't cry when she saw me bruised. She just said, "You're safe now," then sat next to me and held my hand so tight I thought I might break again, but in a good way. The next few days passed in a blur of ointments, soup, and whispered check-ins. Ruth kept the world outside. No phones. No visitors. Just healing. But then, on the fourth night, I woke up in a sweat. A nightmare. Of blood. Screaming. The sound of glass breaking. I sat up and realized something. The bedspread, her guest bed, was stained. Near the edge. A small blotch. I ran my finger over it. Still dark red. Still. Fresh. It wasn't mine. Not from me. I asked Ruth. She looked confused. That bed's barely been used. I aired it out before you came. Washed everything. And just like that, the memory hit me the hallway. Marcia's red lipstick. The scream. Her backing away as Gerald struck me again and again. But when the police found me, she was gone. Vanished. And now, blood in a bed that wasn't mine. I felt the room spin. For the first time since I escaped him. A new terror bloomed in my chest, not for what Gerald did to me, but for what he might have done to her. The bruises had started to turn yellow when I finally stepped into the police station. I wore sunglasses, though it was cloudy. I kept my coat zipped all the way up. And still people stared. But I walked in anyway. Because this time, I wasn't going to disappear into silence. Ruth was beside me. She didn't say much. Just held my elbow gently, as if her quiet presence could keep me from falling apart. The officer on duty looked up, and when he saw my face, his eyes widened, not in surprise, but recognition. "We've been trying to reach you," he said softly. "You were listed as a Jane Doe at the hospital." I sat down, and for the first time, I told the whole story. The pregnancies, The bruises. The betrayal. The night Gerald nearly killed me. I told them about Marcia. About the scream. The blood. And how? When I woke up, she was gone. They wrote everything down. Asked questions I hadn't prepared for. Did he have weapons? Did you ever see him bury anything? Was he under the influence? A doctor came to examine me. He shook his head slowly. 4 broken ribs. Fractured cheekbone. Possible concussion. She's lucky to be alive. The next morning, I got a call. Gerald was gone. Left town. Abandoned the house. No forwarding address. No signs of Marcia. Like they both vanished into smoke. But I knew Gerald. He never ran without a reason. And if Marcia wasn't with him, I was starting to fear the worst. It was a Tuesday afternoon when he came to the door. An older man. Maybe in his 60s. Plaid shirt tucked into dusty jeans. He took off his cap as soon as Ruth opened the door. "Sorry to bother," he said. "But I'm looking for Dorothy Thompson." My heart clenched. I hadn't heard my full name said out loud in weeks. I stood up slowly. "I'm Dorothy." The man gave me a long, gentle look. "I'm Bill. I run the lumber yard where Gerald used to work." He scratched the back of his neck. I wasn't sure if I should come. "But, ma'am, something's been eaten at me." He stepped in. Sat at the edge of the couch, hands shaking a little. "Few months back, Gerald started ordering lumber under a different name. Said it was for a side project out of town. Small cabin, he claimed. Wanted privacy. That didn't sound like Gerald at all. He hated manual work. He never mentioned any project." Bill continued. "We delivered to a place way out past the county line. Woods. No neighbors. He said it was a hunting retreat. He pulled a small notebook from his shirt pocket. I got the address right here. I kept it, just in case." He handed it to me. And in that moment, I swear my body stopped breathing. Not because of what he said, but because of what I felt. A chill I hadn't felt since the day I woke up bruised and bloodied. I took the notebook with trembling fingers. Ruth looked at me. Alarmed. But I was already lost in thought. If Gerald had built something in the woods, if he'd gone there after disappearing, and if Marcia never came home, then what did that mean? What did that place hold? I didn't have the answers. But suddenly, I knew I had to see it for myself. The knock came just after dawn. Ruth opened the door. I was still sitting on the couch, clutching Bill's notebook like it was a lifeline. My coffee had gone cold. I hadn't slept. 2 officers stood there. One young, one older. Their faces didn't carry urgency, only a heavy kind of knowing. "Miss Thompson," the older one asked. "We found something." I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. I just nodded, stood, and followed them out into the morning mist. The drive took over an hour. We passed the edge of the county, where houses grew further apart and roads turned to gravel. Then dirt. Then silence. The truck slowed near a clearing hidden behind tall trees. And there it was, a small cabin, still unfinished, standing crooked and raw, like a wound that never healed. The officer motioned for me to stay back. But I walked forward anyway. The smell hit first. Earth. Rot. Then I saw the tape. The shovels. The coroner's van. And the hole. A deep pit. Freshly turned soil. And something in it. They didn't let me look too long. I only caught a glimpse. A lock of blonde hair. A red smudge of lipstick. A pale arme. Frozen mid-reach toward nothing. Marcia. Buried. Left behind like trash. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said her name. Soft as breath. And then I asked, "Where's Gerald?" The officer cleared his throat. He was here when we arrived. Tried to run. Pulled a weapon, a hunting rifle. The younger officer shifted. Look down. We had to shoot him. He blinked. Is he? Dead. The older officer confirmed. No survivors at the scene. And just like that, it was over. Gerald. Gone. Marcia. Buried. And me still standing. Still breathing. The police wrapped up the area. Someone offered me a blanket. I didn't feel cold. Only hollow. But something inside me whispered, this isn't the end. Not for me. Because while they dug a body out of the ground, I was climbing out of a different grave, the one Gerald had put me in for years. And now, I was free. You would think that after everything, the bruises, the blood, the body in the woods, people would rally around me. But the truth, they didn't want to look at me. Not because they didn't believe me, but because they did. And the truth was too ugly to be spoken out loud in a town like ours. The first time I left Ruth's house to walk to the store, a woman crossed the street to avoid me. The cashier handed me my change without looking up. The silence felt louder than any insult. Then came the headlines. Man found dead in remote cabin after domestic dispute. Body of local woman discovered suspect, killed by police. They didn't say abuser. They didn't say murderer. They said local man. Gerald's family released a statement. He struggled with demons. He was under stress. He was a good man at heart. And Marcia nothing. No one claimed her. No funeral. No obituary. Just forgotten. The school called a week later. Dorothy, the principal said carefully, we're getting a lot of calls from parents. They're concerned? I knew what was coming. Some of my students had seen the news. Some parents didn't want their kids learning from that woman. The one with the bruised face and the murdered husband. 2 days later, I was asked not to return. Ruth cried when I told her. I didn't. I just sat by the window and watched the sun set over a town I no longer recognized. This place where I once taught spelling and tied shoelaces and made children laugh now saw me as something to be feared. A stain. A story they'd rather forget. And yet I didn't hate them. I understood. It's easier to look away from pain than to stand with it. But that didn't make it right. I stopped getting out of bed. For days, maybe weeks, I barely moved. Didn't eat. Didn't speak. Just stared at the cracks in Ruth's ceiling, wondering if the silence would ever break on its own. No one called anymore. No one knocked. And I didn't blame them. I had become a ghost inside my own skin. Ruth tried. God. She tried. She made soup. Read me books. Put my hand in hers and whispered stories about when we were children. But none of it reached me. I was too far gone. Some mornings I thought about ending it. Others, I didn't think at all. Then one morning, I woke up to the sound of a chair scraping across the wooden floor. It wasn't Ruth. I looked up, and there he was. Dad. His coat still dusty from the road. His face older than I remembered. But his eyes, those eyes hadn't changed. He sat beside me without a word. Not a lecture. Not a question. Just his hand over mine. And his voice. Low and steady. Con không cần phải mạnh mẽ nữa. I broke. Not with sobs. Not with screams. But with a kind of exhale that felt like it came from the bone. And then he did something I didn't expect. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 2 bus tickets. Louisville. One way. I've got a little place there. Small. To Butquiet. Come with me. We'll figure it out. I looked at him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something in someone's eyes that wasn't pity or fear. I saw home. 2 days later. We left. No, goodbye. No suitcase. Just me. Dad, and the road. The town disappeared behind us in the bus window, and ahead of us, somewhere down that long, uncertain stretch of highway, was a beginning. Not the clean kind. Not the shiny kind. but real, and that was enough. Louisville didn't look like a new beginning. Not at first. It was cold. The sky gray like a wet towel. The streets unfamiliar and loud. Dad rented a small room above a thrift store. It smelled of mothballs and old carpet, and the window faced a brick wall. But it had a door that locked, and a bed that was mine, and nobody screamed in the night. So to me, it was sanctuary. Dad found work within the week. He took a job sweeping floors at the bus depot. His back bent, but his spirit steady. He'd come home smelling like oil and exhaust. But he always brought something: a pack of crackers, a cup of cheap coffee, a small smile. I saw a little bookstore down the road. He said one night, "Might be a good place for you to sit. Just read. No one will ask questions." He didn't push. He never did. He just offered softness, the kind I hadn't known in years. I spent hours by that bookstore window. Didn't talk to anyone. Just watched. Old couples arguing softly. Children pressing sticky faces to glass. Teenagers pretending not to care while they cared too much. And slowly, without warning, something in me began to shift. I didn't smile. Not yet. But I stopped holding my breath. I stopped flinching at the sound of footsteps behind me. I started to believe I could take up space in this world without apology. One evening, Dad cooked. Nothing fancy. Just beans, rice, and 2 eggs. But he set the table like it was Thanksgiving. We sat across from each other, 2 people holding silence. But not the kind that hurts. The kind that says we're still here. It was a Saturday, the kind of late spring morning where everything feels possible if you let it. Dad had gone to the library. So I wandered to the park near the river. Not looking for anything. Just walking. There was a food truck parked under a willow tree. It smelled like sugar and cinnamon and something warm. I stood near it for a long while, pretending to admire the ducks. "Ever had a funnel cake?" The voice came from behind the counter. I turned. She was about my age. Maybe a little older. Dark curls tucked under a scarf. Eyes like a storm that had learned how to smile. I shook my head. "Not really." She smiled wider. "Well, that's a tragedy I can fix." 10 minutes later, I was sitting on a bench with powdered sugar on my jeans and grease on my fingers. And for the first time in months, a flicker of comfort in my chest. She joined me. Uninvited, but not unwelcome. "I'm Lenore," she said, handing me a napkin. "You're new around here." "I can always tell." I nodded, unsure how to answer, but she didn't need one. "You don't have to talk," she said softly. "But if you ever want to, I'm here most weekends." She paused. "Pain has a scent? You know, I've learned to recognize it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the warmth of the funnel cake, or the way she didn't push. But I started to speak. A little at first, then more, then everything." She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, didn't tell me to look on the bright side. She just listened. And when I finally ran out of breath, Lenore looked at me, not with pity, but with the kind of knowing only another survivor carries. "I run a little diner 2 blocks from here," she said. "It's nothing fancy, but I could use a hand." She smiled. "And I think you could use a place to start." The diner was small. 3 tables, a chalkboard menu. Everything smelled like pancakes and hope. I wiped tables, washed dishes, learned how to fold napkins into tulips. And every Saturday, I passed the same corner of the park where a group of kids always gathered near the fountain. Some barefoot, some loud, all curious. One afternoon, one of them pointed at me and said, "Hey, lady, you used to be a teacher." "Right," I froze. The question hung in the air like a string tugging at something old inside me. "Yeah," I said. A long time ago. The boy shrugged. We're bad at spelling. You could help. That's how it started. Just me. A few kids. A blanket. And a box of sidewalk chalk. We practiced letters in the dirt. We made games out of grammar. They asked questions like, why is knife spelled with a K, and do all stories have to have a hero? And I answered them. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For the first time in years, I wanted to. Every week. More kids came. Some brought younger siblings. Others brought old notebooks and broken pencils and stories they wanted to write. Lenore started sending over snacks. The other vendors at the park started calling it Miss Dot's class. I didn't correct them. It felt good to be Miss Dot again. One evening, as I packed up the chalk, a girl with tangled hair and big eyes tugged at my sleeve. Are you a real teacher? She asked. I paused. Then I smiled. Not yet, I said, but I'm working on it. That night, I looked up community colleges in Louisville. The deadline for fall semester was 2 weeks away, and something inside me whispered, it's time. Wherever you're listening from, whether it's a quiet night or a messy afternoon, if this part of Dorothy's journey stirred something in you, leave us a few words. Let Tenacity Tales know where you're from and what you're feeling. We're always listening, not just with ears, but with heart. And if you'd like to stay with stories like these, a simple subscribe is more than enough. Dorothy's journey isn't over yet. Stay with us. The next chapter, it's her very first classroom this time. As a student again, I enrolled at the University of Louisville at the age of 26. I was the oldest in most of my classes. Some called me ma'am without thinking. Some assumed I was the TA. But none of that mattered. Not really. Because for the first time in my life, I was learning for me. Not to survive. Not to escape. But to grow. My first semester was brutal. I worked at Lenore's diner from dawn till noon, then walked 3 miles to campus for my afternoon classes. At night, I studied in the cramped apartment while Dad snored softly in the next room. Some days, my hands ached from scrubbing pans. Other days, my heart ached from old memories creeping in between lecture notes. But I didn't quit. Every time I wanted to, I thought of the girl at the fountain, asking if I was a real teacher. And I kept going. By my second year, I was accepted into the teaching practicum. They placed me at an inner-city school underfunded, undersupported, and filled with kids who had learned to survive more than they'd ever been taught to hope. My classroom had cracked windows and broken desks. My students had more bruises than backpacks, but they had fire in their eyes. And I was ready. I didn't walk in trying to save them. I walked in remembering what it felt like to be unseen. And I made them a promise. In this room, no one disappears. The first month was chaos. Kids testing me, testing themselves, testing the world. Some didn't know their alphabets. Some didn't know kindness. But slowly we built something. Routine, trust, a space that didn't hurt. I brought chalk. I brought crayons. I brought a little wooden stool I found on the street and called it the story chair. And every week, we read. By the end of the year, 28 out of 30 students in my class could read and write their own name. One girl wrote me a letter, "Thank you for not quitting on us." I folded it and kept it in my coat pocket for the days when my voice trembled too much to teach. Sometimes, all it takes is a small chair, a piece of chalk, and someone who doesn't leave to make a child believe they matter. It was a rainy afternoon. I remember because the sky felt too heavy, and my class was restless from being stuck indoors. We were making paper boats, a last-minute idea to calm them down, when the school secretary knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you," she whispered. I stepped into the hallway, still holding a soggy paper boat, and there she was. A woman, Gray sweater. Nervous hands. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "I'm Anna," she said quietly. "Gerald's sister." The world slowed. I don't remember what I said, if I said anything at all. My palms went cold. "I'm not here to defend him," she said quickly. "I'm here because there's something you need to know." She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. A small boy. 5 years old, maybe. "Bye, guys." Soft smile. A swirl of dark hair. His name? Written on the back in fading ink, Lucas. "Marcia had a baby," Anna said. "Before everything happened. Before she died." My breath caught. She didn't tell Gerald right away. And when she did, he didn't want anyone to know. Especially not you. Lucas had been staying with a foster family, but recently, things changed. They're moving. And Lucas, he doesn't have anyone else. No one in the family is willing to take him. She looked up finally. Her voice cracked. "He's a good boy. Dorothy. He's kind. Quiet. Loves to draw." She placed the photo in my hand. I didn't know who else to come to. I stood frozen long after she left. The photo burned in my palm. Lucas. The child of Gerald and Marcia. The child of two people who had torn my life apart. But what did that make him? He didn't choose them. He didn't ask for this. All he did was survive. That night, I sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at that photo, wondering how the universe could be this cruel or this strangely full circle. Dad sat across from me, reading in silence. Eventually, I spoke. "I think I need to meet him." I met Lucas in a sunlit office with coloring books on the floor and a social worker who kept checking the clock. He was smaller than I expected, legs swinging off the vinyl chair, eyes too serious for a 5-year-old. He didn't smile when I walked in, just looked. Not scared, not shy, just studying. Like he was trying to figure out what kind of person I'd be before he let his heart move even an inch. "I brought something," I said, and handed him a tiny notebook with a pack of crayons. He didn't thank me, just opened it and started drawing. A house, 2 stick figures holding hands, a dog. Then, quietly, "That's me, and that's you, and that's Ruff. Ruff, my dog. He's not real." I smiled. "Maybe we can find a real one someday." He didn't look up, but he nodded. That's how it started. Not with hugs, not with big moments, just small drawings and smaller silences. He moved in a week later. The early days were hard. He had nightmares, didn't like loud noise, didn't want to eat unless I was in the room. Sometimes, he stared at me like he was waiting for me to disappear. And I understood, because I'd once waited for the same thing. But little by little, things shifted. He started humming while brushing his teeth, started setting the table without asking, started leaving his drawings on the fridge with my name in the corner. One night, I tucked him in and turned off the light. As I reached for the doorknob, he whispered, "Good night, Mom." I froze, not because I wasn't ready to hear it, but because I didn't know how much I needed to. I turned back, kneeled by his bed, brushed the hair from his forehead, and said, "I love you, Lucas. I'm not going anywhere." A few months later, I filed the paperwork. Adoption. Legal. Permanent. Mine. The judge asked me, "Do you understand what this means?" I smiled. "It means he never has to wonder again if someone wants him." It started with a stomachache. Lucas came home from school pale and quiet, said he didn't feel like eating, which for him was serious. By nightfall, he was doubled over, sweating and crying. I bundled him in blankets and rushed him to the nearest clinic. I didn't know where the pediatric emergency room was. I didn't know how to fill out the insurance form right. I didn't know who to call for help. But someone did. He wore scrubs, a gentle voice, and the kind of calm that makes you want to sit down and breathe. "Hi," he said, crouching beside Lucas. "I'm Anthony. We're gonna take care of you." "Little man." Lucas clutched my hand tight, but he looked at Anthony, and somehow he nodded. Turned out it was appendicitis. They prepped him for surgery that night. I stayed by his side the whole time, staring at monitors I didn't understand, holding his hand even when he was asleep. At some point, Anthony came back with coffee. "I figured you wouldn't leave, so I brought fuel." I took the cup with shaking fingers. "Thank you," I whispered. "You're doing great," he said. He didn't ask who I was to Lucas. Didn't assume. Just sat beside me for a while, like it was the most normal thing in the world to offer presents instead of questions. After surgery, when Lucas woke up groggy and safe, he reached out blindly, and Anthony gently guided his hand back to mine. "He's okay," he said softly. "You did good." Over the next few days, Anthony checked in. Nothing heavy, just notes on the whiteboard. Lucas smiled today. He ate half a muffin, still doesn't like green jello, and I started to look forward to those notes more than I realized. When we were discharged, Anthony walked us to the door. "You've got a tough kid," he said. I nodded. "He's got a tougher mom." He blinked, unsure how to respond. Then he handed me a folded slip of paper. "My sister runs an art class at the rec center. Might be good for him. Also," his eyes met mine, "if you ever want to talk, or grab coffee, just talk." He didn't push, just placed the paper in my hand, smiled, and turned away. I held onto that paper for 2 weeks before I texted him. The first time Lucas called Anthony Dad. It wasn't planned. We were at the park. Anthony tying his shoelace, Lucas running ahead and shouting, "Dad, watch me," and then froze, like he wasn't sure where that word came from. Anthony just looked up and said, "I'm watching. Buddy, go for it. No fuss, no fanfare. Just love." Folded into a sentence. That night, over dinner, Lucas asked, "Can we make it official someday?" And we did. The wedding was small. A backyard, some borrowed chairs, a lemon cake from Lenor's diner. Lucas carried the rings. I wore yellow. Anthony wore a smile that didn't fade all day. We didn't say forever out loud, we just lived it. One kie. Promise at a time. After the honeymoon, a weekend road trip with maps drawn by Lucas, I was offered something unexpected. The principal of my old practicum school was retiring early due to health, and the district wanted me to take over. At first, I laughed. Me, a principal. But something deep inside whispered, "Yes, now it's your turn to build the place you never had." The school was still broken, peeling paint, loose doorknobs, tired teachers and kids who'd stopped hoping, but I knew how to start. We painted walls. We planted flowers. We opened the gym on weekends for families. I made space for soft things, morning check-ins. Story time. A quiet corner with blankets and books for anyone overwhelmed. We called it the pause room. And slowly, the school changed. Kids smiled more. Teachers stayed longer. Parents started showing up. Anthony helped with after-school programs. Lucas came by with his backpack, helping younger kids tie their shoes. We were a family. Not perfect, not without bad days, but real. One evening, I stayed late grading papers. The janitor walked past and said, "You really love this place, don't you?" I looked around at the photos on the walls. The thank you notes from kids. The mess that felt like home. And I said, I guess I just never stopped believing that schools can heal. 2. It was a Tuesday morning. Ordinary in every way. I was making breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, juice in mismatched mugs. Lucas was brushing his teeth, humming a song off-key. Anthony was reading the newspaper, glasses slipping down his nose. And I was holding the counter, dizzy. It wasn't dramatic. No fainting, no gasping, just a quiet sway. Like my body was trying to whisper something before the words caught up. Anthony looked up. Are you okay? I nodded. Just tired. Maybe the flu. But 2 weeks later, when the tired didn't pass, when the queasiness became routine, I took a test. Then 2 more. I sat on the edge of the tub, watching that little pink line appear like it was some kind of miracle etched in plastic. Pregnant. At 39. After everything. After doctors had told me long ago not to hope. I told Anthony first. We sat on the porch. The wind was light, and my hands were trembling. I didn't think this could happen. I said. He smiled. Neither did I. But maybe the world's finally catching up. Lucas was next. He blinked, then grinned. Do I get to be a big brother? You already are. I said. Now you just get to practice. He started drawing names that night. None of them were right. Until one. Amy. The pregnancy wasn't easy. I was tired all the time. Worried. Cautious. Checking everything twice. But also, so deeply grateful. Every kick felt like a message: I'm here. I'm real. I chose you. When Amy was born, she had a cry that filled the room like music. A head full of dark hair, and fists clenched tight like she had something to say. I held her, and everything else melted away. Loss. Fear. All of it. There was only her. And this soft, impossible joy. Lucas tiptoed into the hospital room. Eyes wide. He looked at her. Then looked at me. She's small. He whispered. She's perfect. I said. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. He was 17 when he found the birth certificate. It wasn't hidden. Just tucked away in a drawer with old photo albums and hospital bracelets. I walked into the room and saw him sitting on the edge of his bed, paper in hand. Face un readable. Lucas. I said. He looked up. Slowly. You said I was adopted. I did. But you didn't say, who? I sat down across from him. Tried to find my breath. That's true. I whispered. I didn't. There are some conversations you rehearse for years, over and over in your head. But when the moment arrives, your heart always beats faster than your memory. I was married once. I began. His name was Gerald. I told him the truth. Not just the facts, but the feelings. The shame, the fear, the pain, the loss. The parts that made me want to disappear, and the part that made me stay. You were born into something broken. I said, but you are not broken. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, softly, did he hurt you? I nodded. Did he hurt her too? Yes. I said, worse. And I'm his kid. No. I said, reaching for his hand. You're my kid. That's the only part that ever mattered. We sat like that for a while. Quiet. Steady. Raw. Then he asked, does Anthony know? He knows everything. And he still chose us. Lucas nodded. Okay. He said. Then looked at the paper one last time. Can we change it? Change what? My name. I want it to say, Lucas Wilson Parker. like everyone else in this family. 3 months later, a judge made it official. Lucas stood in front of the court, tall and sure, wearing the suit Anthony had pressed for him that morning. When the papers were signed, the judge smiled. "Congratulations, son." Lucas looked back at me and said, "Thanks, Mom, for telling me everything, and for choosing me." The house was quiet. Not sad quiet, just full of echoes. Lucas had just left for his first job in New York, a real architect now. Portfolio in one hand, suitcase in the other. Amy was packing, too. She'd been accepted into the University of Louisville's medical program, top of her class. I watched her fold her sweaters, hair tied in a messy bun, face glowing with the thrill of everything ahead. "You excited?" I asked, leaning on the doorframe. She nodded, a little scared, but mostly, yeah. Then she stopped, turned to me. "Do you remember that time I had a fever in 3rd grade and you stayed up all night with me?" Reading Charlotte's Web over and over just to make me laugh between coughs, I smiled. "I remember. Well," she said, "that's why I want to be a doctor." That evening, Lucas called from his apartment. Still no furniture, but his voice was warm. "Mom," he said, "I made it." He didn't mean just to New York. He meant through it, through everything. 2 weeks later, the school board called. They wanted me at a ceremony. Teacher of the Year. I stood on a stage in a dress Amy had picked out. Lucas watching through a live stream. Anthony holding my hand. Proud as ever. I didn't prepare a speech. But when I looked out at the audience, parents, students, teachers, something came to me. "I don't measure success by test scores," I said, "or graduation rates, or college acceptance letters. I measure it by the day a kid says thank you without being asked, by the moment they help each other up without thinking, by the fact that my son still calls me Mom. And my daughter wants to heal people because someone once stayed up reading a book when she was sick." The room was quiet, then full of applause. That night, as we walked to the car, Lucas texted me, "Everything I know about love, I learned from you." It started with a lump. Nothing painful. Nothing urgent. Just something I noticed one morning in the shower. A small hardness under the skin, like a whisper trying to become a scream. I didn't tell anyone that day. Just went to work. Smiled through meetings. Graded papers with shaking hands. The doctor confirmed it a week later. Breast cancer. Stage 1. Treatable. But real? Anthony was the first to know. He listened. Didn't panic. Just held my hand and said, "We fought storms before. This one won't take us either." I didn't cry in front of Amy. She was knee-deep in medical school, and I didn't want to burden her. But of course, she found out. And when she did, she didn't cry either. She bought a whiteboard, drew a treatment schedule, color-coded everything. "I need you here in 20 years to hold my first baby," she said. Lucas took the news in silence. Then he came over with a grocery bag full of tea, soup, and a pink beanie he'd crocheted himself. I watched a tutorial. He shrugged. "Don't laugh." But I didn't laugh. I cried. Softly, gratefully. Chemo was brutal. The nausea, the weight loss, the hair that came out in handfuls. But every time I looked in the mirror, I remembered that I had faced worse. And survived. I made a deal with myself. For every treatment, I'd do one thing that made me feel alive. Some days it was gardening. Some days it was writing letters to former students. Some days it was simply watching the sun rise with a blanket around my shoulders and a dog sleeping at my feet. The community rallied. Teachers brought casseroles. Parents left flowers on my porch. Former students sent postcards from wherever life had taken them. I teach now. One wrote, because you showed me what it means to believe in someone. After the last round of chemo, my body was exhausted, but my spirit stronger than it had ever been. Amy came with me to the final scan. She held my hand as the doctor spoke the words, "You're clear." We both exhaled, and laughed, and cried. Later that night, I sat in the garden, hands in the soil, planting Leonor. Anthony poured us tea. Lucas fixed a light on the porch. Amy danced barefoot in the grass. And I whispered to myself, I am still here. And I am still me. He came into the world on a Tuesday. Peter, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, lungs strong enough to wake the whole floor, and a head full of hair just like Lucas had as a baby. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I didn't think of pain. I didn't think of the years I lost. I just thought, this is what it feels like when the past is finally at peace. Lucas stood beside me, tired and teary-eyed, his hand on his wife's shoulder. She did amazing. He whispered, you both did. I became a grandmother that morning. But more than that, I became a witness to a new chapter being written by hands I had once held through storms. At school, things were changing. Too. More students than ever. New staff. Fresh ideas. It was no longer my school. And that was okay. One morning, I stood in the hallway as the new principal greeted kids at the door. She looked just like I did 20 years ago, a little nervous. Allô, passionnette. I smiled. Time had circled back. At the farewell ceremony, students sang. Teachers cried. Amy gave a speech that made even the janitor tear up. But I didn't cry. Because this wasn't an ending. It was a release. A quiet, gentle, handing over from one pair of hands to another. That evening, back at home, I sat in the rocking chair by the window, Peter asleep on my chest, his breath soft and steady like waves. Anthony made tea. Lucas dozed on the couch. I looked out over the garden, the herbs growing in neat rows, the sunlight slanting across Amy's forgotten sandals in the grass, and whispered, we're good. We're really good. It happened quietly. My mother passed in her sleep. A heart that had carried too much, for too long, finally decided to rest. I flew back to Pikeville, to the small house she had kept so tidy. Even when her hands began to tremble. In the hallway, her perfume still lingered. In the kitchen, her teacups were stacked just the way she liked. Amy stayed beside me as I packed her scarves. Lucas sorted through books. Anthony replaced the screen door that had always squeaked. My father followed her 3 months later. He just faded. No sickness. No hospital. Just grief that had nowhere to go once she was gone. At the cemetery, I stood between their 2 names. Weathered. Gentle. I'm okay. I whispered, I really am. And for the first time, I meant it. We had talked, long before, about what to do with the house. Sell it. My mother once said, it's just walls. But it wasn't. Not to me. That house had held me when I had nothing left. Those walls had heard my nightmares, my prayers, my trying again and again. I couldn't let it go. So I turned it into something else. A small community classroom. 2 evenings a week. Open to anyone who wanted to read. Write. Talk. Sit. No grades. No judgment. Just presence. The children came first. Then their mothers. Then the fathers who said, I never got past 5th grade. But maybe it's not too late. I planted her roses in the front yard, hung my father's coat by the door, and every Tuesday and Thursday. I opened the house, lit the lamp on the windowsill, and whispered, "Come in. You're not too late." It started during lockdown. The world stopped. So did my little classroom. No more Tuesday evenings. No more kids crowding around the old dining table with crayons and wide eyes. No more late-night tea with tired mothers who just needed someone to listen. For a while, I felt useless, like I had been paused, erased. I stayed home, tended the garden, wrote in my journals. But the silence was heavy, and the stories inside me, they didn't want to stay quiet. One afternoon, Lucas called. He had that tone half curious, half shaming. "Mom," he said, "have you ever thought about recording yourself telling stories?" I blinked. "Stories, yeah. Your stories. Not just bedtime ones. The real ones. The kind you told us when we were too sad to sleep." I laughed. "Who would want to hear those?" Lucas didn't laugh. "A lot more people than you think." He set it up for me. A simple microphone. A borrowed camera. A channel name he whispered like a secret Tenacity tales. "The world needs stories like yours," he said. "Ones that don't pretend life is easy, but prove it's still worth living." The first video was shaky. My voice trembled. I didn't know where to look, but I told the truth. About Pikeville, about Gerald, about the classroom, about the lavender in my garden, and the time Amy stitched a doll's arm back on with dental floss. I didn't expect anything. At first, there were no comments, no hearts, no shares, just silence, but not the kind that hurts, the kind that listens. I told myself, if just one person hears this and feels less alone, then it's worth it. One morning, there was a message. Just 6 words. "This sounds like my mother's voice." That was enough. Enough to keep going. Enough to know someone, somewhere, needed what I had lived through. Tenacity Tales is still small, still quiet, but it's here like a porch light left on in case someone's walking home in the dark. If you're listening, if any part of this feels familiar, I hope you'll stay a while. Leave a sign that you were here. A word, a whisper, even just "I heard you." This isn't about going viral. It's about going inward and reaching outward, one soul at a time. That night, I sat in front of the camera again. Same old chair. Sam quiet garden. But this time, I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was telling ours. I never planned to tell it all. Not the hard parts. Not the dark chapters. Not the memories that still visit me in dreams. But here I am, 73, and I've said everything. Everything I remember. Everything I've carried. Why now? Because one day, you realize stories don't belong to you. They're just borrowed for a while. They live inside you until someone else needs them more. I told you about Gerald, about the pain, the silence, the rage. I told you about Marcia, and what it means to lose someone in a way that never gets closure. I told you about my father's hand on my shoulder, and my mother's humming while folding laundry, and the smell of apples baking on Sunday afternoons. I told you about Amy, Lucas, Anthony, and how a life once shattered can be rebuilt not back to what it was, but into something quietly beautiful. Maybe your story doesn't look like mine. Maybe your scars are in different places. But if you've ever held your breath in the dark, or whispered a prayer with no words left, then maybe, just maybe, you've walked the same path. People ask me how I survived. I didn't. Not all of me. Some parts were lost, left behind, but the parts that stayed, they learned to grow around the broken. They learned to love anyway. And in the end, that's what remains. Not the pain, not the fear, not even the memory. Just love. Soft, stubborn, sacred. So if you're still here listening, I hope this story wraps around you like a warm quilt. Not to fix you, just to remind you you're not alone. And never have been. If you're still here, then maybe this story touched something inside you. Didn't it? I don't need much from you. Just a word. A sign. Just to know you were here and listening. Maybe a comment. Maybe a quiet little heart beneath the video. Tiny things, but warm enough to keep this storyteller going. This channel, Tenacity Tales, is where real stories keep breathing. I hope it stays a quiet corner for those who need to be heard, or simply need to listen. If you want to return someday, you can click subscribe. Not to follow, just so we don't lose each other. Thank you for staying this long, for listening this deep, and if ever your life feels too quiet, come back here. I'll still be here.